It's time for your daily LSU baseball update with Musso at the box. Now, Matt Musso.
Off and running. Welcome in another edition of Musso at the Box, presented by Gauntlet Light Installers. Fired up to have you along for the ride. We're just a couple days out from LSU and either Texas A&M or Auburn doing battle in the SEC tournament. That game will be on Friday, scheduled for a 6:30 p.m. Central start time. What I wanted to do today is talk about LSU's pitching plan a little bit more in depth. Jay Johnson, when he met with the media on Tuesday, he talked about how he views setting up pitching in the SEC tournament, how he views LSU and their tournament resume for the NCAA right now, and if that would impact their plans, all those things. And what I did after hearing Jay's conversations and hearing his explanations, I guess I should say, is I went back and looked at each year and how Jay Johnson set it up, what days LSU played, to try to gather something as to where LSU might go into this. Now, what's interesting is, yes, there's a format change in the SEC tournament, and that's absolutely going to factor in here as well. We're going to lay it all out for you here on today's Musso at the Box. And then the next thing you know, we'll be previewing LSU's opponent as they get set to do battle in the SEC tournament on Friday. So please smash the like button if you have not already. If you're watching on YouTube, get subscribed to the YouTube channel, but also on your favorite podcast app, just search Musso at the Box, hit the subscribe. You can take the show with you wherever you may go. Follow on social media as well, Twitter X at Musso Matthew. You can find me on Instagram and on Facebook. And let's go ahead and just kind of get right into it. Jay Johnson met with the media on Tuesday before LSU left for Hoover on Wednesday. I would much rather play the audio for you, but again, my apologies. We're still working through the issue, and that capability has not returned to me yet. So I very much apologize. It would be much better if you could hear it from Jay himself. But what I would do is I would just paraphrase and give you the gist of it. The important part of this conversation is what we're going to have looking back at the history. But Jay Johnson, one of the first things he was asked in that press conference Tuesday was, does he think that they've locked up a national seed? And Jay Johnson said absolutely. He said, given what they've done, how they've earned it through their play and the consistency of their play, like 19-11 is very, very consistent in the league. And it's really if you remember at the halfway point, the conversation we kept having was LSU, they went 10-5. Like, they're right on track for 20-10. And everybody wanted to kind of poke holes in that and be like, yeah, but I mean, 3 of those wins are against Missouri and then Mississippi State. And Mississippi State wasn't, a tournament team at that point in time. Now they are. That series looks a little bit better for you, doesn't it? And it's like, man, the second half of the season so tough, and they just gotten swept by Auburn. LSU went 9-6 on the back half. I mean, they were one game worse than they were in the first 5 weeks. Like, that is remarkable consistency, especially given some of the issues that this team has fought through. So when you put it all together, that is a really strong 19-11 that they have. And Jay Johnson, in short, he said, yeah, absolutely. In his mind, they've locked it up. So the obvious follow-up is, does that impact, your pitching plan? And on Tuesday, Jay said he hadn't made up his mind yet. They kind of want to see how things play out. And he would even go as far as to say, look, that's not to say that they're not going to play to win the game. They are going to go out there and play to win the game like they do every single time. They want to go out there and win. And he even referenced 2023 with Paul Skeens. And oh, you know what? He got knocked around a little bit in that game. He was at 31 pitches in an inning with the bases loaded. You had everything locked up. You looked towards the future, and you pulled him. And that's the only situation ever where Paul Skeens would have come out of the game with the bases loaded. So using all those things, which you haven't decided, you want to see how things are playing out, all of that, new format, What decision do they ultimately make? So let's go in the Wayback Machine, shall we? Because the question here is Cade Anderson your game one starter? Because I've made my feelings known to y'all. I think LSU has a top 8 locked up as well. I think LSU could go get run ruled on Friday by whomever they're playing, and it would not matter because of everything else that we just talked about. The consistency of record throughout the SEC. You won 42 games in the regular season, and 19 of those came in the toughest league. And you did it against the top, middle, and the bottom. Like, you played each tier of the SEC, and you had success against each tier in the SEC. You finished top 4 in the toughest league. You have a top 8 RPI. You were right there with the tops in the country in quad 1 wins. Like, for all the reasons we have talked about since the series wrapped at South Carolina, I think LSU has it wrapped up. So what are they going to do? Well, when you look back at the history of LSU in the SEC tournament under Jay Johnson, you find some pretty remarkable consistency. And that's notable because you were in different scenarios really each time. So if you go back to 2022, LSU was 17-13 in the SEC. Like, they were going to the NCAA tournament. That ticket was punched. You weren't really worried about that. The interesting thing was, could you play yourself into a host potentially in that regard in the SEC tournament? Like, that was kind of the conversation. Because at 17-13, you'd normally kind of have that locked up anyway, but it was an odd year in the SEC. That was when Tennessee went like 25-5, and it just kind of skewed things. And it's like, okay, can you play yourself off the 2 line and onto the 1? And if you'll also remember, LSU and just really everybody that year in the SEC tournament, the weather was absolutely horrible. Horrible. So your first game gotten moved all the way to Thursday that year. The whole thing was just backed up. Because if memory serves correct, LSU was supposed to play the final game of the day Tuesday, and that just never happened. Anyway, with that in mind, kind of went on a tangent there, sorry. With that in mind, what you were playing for completely different. You're seeing if you can get yourself off the 2 line and onto the 1 and host a regional at 17-13. Get a few wins in Hoover and maybe improve your lot enough. And with the weather problems, you moved to Thursday. LSU started Mikhail Hilliard, who was their game 1 starter for the majority of that season in 2022. You faced Kentucky and Mikhail Hilliard on normal rest because he had pitched the Thursday prior at Vanderbilt to close out the regular season, went out there and gave LSU 6 great innings. You won that ball game. You moved on to face Tennessee, where, surprise, surprise, you threw Ty Floyd, who was your normal game 2 starter to that point in the year. And on his normal rest, because he threw that Friday, that's where you went. You would lose that game and then get skunked by Kentucky the next game. You started Jacob Hasty, and you didn't have a third starter that year. You weren't even close to have a third starter that year. But the schedule changed, the weather aligned, and you saw LSU with the opportunity go 1-2 in their rotation. 2023. Obviously, we remember LSU's going in there at 19-10 in the league. They were the number 3 seed, very similar to this year. Very similar to this year. You had everything locked up. You knew. Your first game that year was on Wednesday because that's the old format. And then the 12-team format, when you had the top 4 seeds, you got a single bye. You didn't play Tuesday. You started on Wednesday. So LSU's first game was on Wednesday. Thatcher Hurd got the start on that day. And he was awesome, 6 innings, all the stuff. That's really, the second out into the where you're just like, oh, wait a minute. After that extra inning, they're fair against Georgia. Wait a minute, here we go. So Hurd gets to start that day. You win, you advance to Thursday. You're playing Arkansas. Paul Skeens gets the ball after pitching. That was his 7th day because he pitched the Thursday game the week prior to close out the season. He got the ball, and that's the outing we talked about that Jay referenced earlier. Paul Skeens in that outing went 3 2/3, gave up 2 earned runs, but threw 88 pitches in 3 2/3. He didn't get you through 4 innings. Arkansas got to him a little bit, and the bases were loaded. There were some errors. He was at 31 pitches in the inning, like we addressed earlier, and you got him out because everything was sewed up. But it was also double elimination at that point. You lose that game to Arkansas. You come back the next day. It's a Friday. You're playing Texas A&M. Ty Floyd gets the baseball. Ty Floyd gives you 5 innings, 93 pitches. He was actually magnificent that day. So once you got back to a spot where you were normal rest or 7 days, you saw them go 1-2 in their rotation. Different format. Keep that in mind. A year ago. Does anybody remember what LSU did in the SEC tournament a year ago? So you're playing on Tuesday, but think about the scenario you were in. You were a 13-win conference team. You felt good because your metrics were strong. You had a great strength of schedule, all those things, but you knew, man, if you go to Hoover and you win 1 game, it's locked up. LSU played on Tuesday, and they threw Gage Jump, who had been at the front of their rotation and had pitched that Thursday prior in the home finale series against Ole Miss. They came back and threw him on Tuesday, and he gave you 7 innings and 105 pitches and was awesome. And then the next day when you got to Wednesday, you threw Luke Holman, your number 2. So you threw both of those guys on what would be 2 days short rest coming off the week prior. Scenario obviously different because you knew if you could win a game or maybe it was done and you weren't going to leave anything to chance. But the big takeaway from that whole exercise we went through is LSU throws their best in Hoover under Jay Johnson. They just do. And it's going to happen again, in my opinion, come Friday night. And I think the 2 years that point most favorably to this are 22 and 23. 22 in the vein that the schedule, was pushed back and such that Hilliard, Floyd were on their normal rest. They were on 7 days rest, like Anderson, like Ianson would be. Right? 2023 in the vein that you have everything locked up, but once you got to normal rest for your pitchers, Skeens and Floyd, they threw. Different format, obviously. But you look at this, you have everything locked up, and you have the ability to throw your pitchers on normal rest. And I think that's absolutely what LSU does. And if somehow you've missed my take on this, it's absolutely what I want them to do. My whole thing with the SEC tournament, and again, it's one reason I don't like the new format of the single elimination and prefer the double elimination. I know you can't necessarily do that with 16 teams. We've had that whole conversation. But my sole purpose in Hoover is to get your 1 and your 2 a start. Play long enough to get your 1 and a 2 a start to keep them in their routine. Because routine is extremely important with pitchers. It's extremely important with baseball players in general. Think of all the superstition that revolves around this sport, right? That just all goes into routine. And routine is massively, massively important in this game, and especially with starting pitchers. And Jay Johnson has run a very routine-oriented program. And you have the luxury in this new format in getting the double bye, and specifically the double bye that puts you on Friday because you're the 3 seed, in playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday like a regular weekend. And you held Anderson and Ianson against South Carolina. And I told y'all then, when we had the whole conversation about them pitching off, it was less to do about the Anderson injury and much more to do about setting things up for the postseason. This counts as the postseason. Jay Johnson knew you win that series, you finish 19-11, you are likely playing on Friday. And you could go Anderson, win, Ianson, and then who the hell cares what happens after Ianson pitches on Saturday? Like, as soon as he's lifted from that game, you can lose and who cares? So that's absolutely what I want to do, is keep these guys in their routine and let them go. And the other reason I think 2023 compares so favorably to this year is I think you see that same type of scenario. You let him go out there, but you have him on a pitch count, probably around 80 or so, 75, 80 pitches for Anderson. And if he gets into trouble, no matter the situation, you pull him. But you got him out there. He went through his routine. He stayed loose. He got through it. Now, say you lose and you don't get to have Anthony Ianson go out there. What do you do then? Well, you're going to have to simulate it the best you can for him, to kind of get him into that structure again. I don't know if that plays the same. I don't know if it's just a bullpen. I don't know. I wasn't a college pitcher. But I also know if you have Cade Anderson on the bump for any length of time, you strengthen your chances of winning. And again, that's my thing. I want LSU to be able to get Anderson and Ianson opportunity. It wouldn't even bother me if you used Ianson in relief potentially, just to get him out there, knowing you're not guaranteed a game. That obviously would have a lot to do with how the game's going and things of that nature. But I'd even be okay with that a little bit. It moves him up a day, sure. But when he'd pitch in the regional on the next week, because make no mistake, Jay Johnson is starting Cade Anderson against the 4 seed, he'd be on an extra day's rest at that point. It sets up very, very well for you to be a 2 or a 3 seed in this tournament going forward, as long as this is the format. That is where you should want to be, because that is when you will be able to just set things up like a weekend. I mean, of course, do you want to win the SEC? Sure, you absolutely do. But if you're looking at setting things up for the postseason, a 2 or a 3 seed is absolutely where you want to be in this tournament going forward. LSU's there, and it sets up perfectly for them. And I'm going to tell you, I'd be shocked at this point if that's not what LSU does. It would be because of everything we laid out earlier in this episode. It goes against everything else that Jay Johnson has done. The only time he did not throw his ace was 2023, because you were playing on Wednesday. You didn't want to throw Skeens on a day short, which factors into this entire conversation we're having about Anderson. He's not on short rest. He's on his normal rest. And as soon as you had Skeen on his normal rest, which is 7 days, you threw him. And even in that regard, it worked, because then when you started the regional and you threw him against a 19-win Tulane team, he was on an extra day rest, and he went complete game and threw like 125 pitches. That's the direction they go. I'd be shocked if they don't at this point, and I think it's absolutely the right call. 100% absolutely the right call. We'll get our answer soon enough, because they're about to know their opponent, and it's either going to be Texas A&M or Auburn. All right, let me remind you about Gotlit Light Installers, gotlitlights.com. Go there for your quote. Permanent outdoor landscape lighting. Remember, it's not just the Christmas light service anymore in the winter, although they still do that, and they're phenomenal at it, and I recommend it for you there as well. But like the Christmas lights, the permanent outdoor landscape lighting, the temporary lighting for your private event outdoor, it's all custom design, all fit to your design specifications, And they don't just install it and never talk to you again. They're there to service your lights however they need to be for the rest of the time. Maintenance, install, take them out for some reason. Gotlit Lights can do that. They can store them. Gotlit Lights. It's your one-stop shop for all your exterior lighting needs. It's not just about install. It's about relationship building and making you a customer for life. That's what Derek and his team do. If you have exterior lighting needs for your home or your office, commercial or residential, Gotlit Light Installers, they are your one call. GotlitLights.com for your quote. Follow them on Facebook as well. You'll be able to see a lot of the stuff that they do, like decorative wreaths. You got the 4th of July coming up, Memorial Day coming up. Get yourself a wreath from Gotlit Light Installers. Tell them you heard it right here on Musso at the Box. All right, well, we have a couple minutes left here. Just a few brief thoughts on some of the action that's happened at the SEC tournament already. And again, full disclosure, I mean, while I'm recording this show, they're in the 3rd game of day 2, like while I'm recording this. So there's a few things that it's like, I mean, some of it's going to be dated, but I think we talked about this kind of a couple weeks ago when looking at, teams to watch in the SEC and maybe sneaking in. Kentucky losing their first game to Oklahoma is extremely intriguing to me because that's a team that's at 13 wins, which you should feel good. Their metrics are pretty good. Kentucky, I mean, they were competitive in a lot of series, but man, you're only at 13 wins and you just lost in Hoover. And now the lasting impression you've left for the committee is a 4-game losing streak. You got swept at Vanderbilt, and then you lose game 1 to Oklahoma, and it wasn't very competitive. Does that ding them? Or is 13 the new 14 because of an expanded SEC? It's kind of the conversation we had back a few weeks ago with Kentucky, except I was wondering if they could even get in at 12 with a win in the SEC tournament and like 12 be the new 13, but maybe 13 is the new 14. So I'll be real curious to see what the committee does with Kentucky because, again, them losing that game and going into Selection Monday on a 4-game losing streak, you can't feel great. But they have a top 40 RPI, a top 10 strength of schedule. The quad 1 win number is down, but that's just something to really look at because with an expanded league, it got tougher. So is 13 wins the new 14 wins? Remember, when you get to 14, it's like you're virtual lock at that point. If you win 14 games in the league, 13 is where you're still holding your breath a little bit. So Kentucky, that's going to be very, very interesting to see. Texas A&M, when they finally locked up Mississippi State, they were dominant. They started Ryan Prager. He was awesome. They were an offensive onslaught. I mean, Jay Slavy let out a grand slam. Let's see if A&M's for real. Like, the resume's good. They're going to have to at least get to Sunday to have a chance to get in. I think they need to win the SEC tournament to get in. That's a long way off. I don't think they can do it, but I'm curious to see what type of run they can make in this thing because they definitely look like a team motivated and a team that understood what they have to do. And that was a big takeaway for me there as well. Tennessee and Alabama scored a combined 25 runs in just a very sloppy and game where pitching was optional and there were errors everywhere. And it just was not a very enjoyable baseball game to watch. But, whatever. I would also tell you that that's a great win for Tennessee, though. Their RPI improved by four spots off that one win. And now if they go beat Texas, Tennessee, I think, absolutely has themselves back in the hosting conversation. I don't think they're there fully. I think they would also need to get to Sunday to really kind of, hammer that home. Because, again, if they did that, I mean, they would have some wins over some pretty elite teams in the RPI. They would have 2 top 5 RPI wins in order to get there. And I think that would bolster them up higher. And plus, at that point, you'd have 3 more SEC wins. So from your 16, you'd be at 19 in the eyes of the committee. And I think that could get Tennessee in. So there's, as a host, I should say, so there's just a lot to kind of look at, going forward in the tournament. It's been fascinating so far already. none of the teams we talked about earlier in the week about, kind of scoreboard watching around, like Oregon has not played their first game yet at the time of this recording. They do that on Thursday. And Florida State plays on Friday like LSU. So, we haven't really entered that portion of it, but just in the SEC tournament aspect of it, it's been fascinating so far. And you've seen a couple teams make some statements, and it's going to be curious knowing what they're playing for, namely Texas A&M, Tennessee, if they can continue that throughout the week as the competition certainly ratchets up and gets stiffer. Look, we're going to keep you posted on all of it here on Musso at the Box, because it impacts the tournament and it impacts seeding, and it also will impact who LSU is going to play at some point during this, during this tournament potentially. So we got you covered wall to wall here on Musso at the Box. Y'all smash the like button, please, if you have not already. Get subscribed to the YouTube channel and on your favorite podcast app. Follow on social media, Got Lit Light Installers, gotlitlights.com. Be here next time for more. We're previewing LSU's Friday opponent on Musso at the Box.